Great. So this was meant to be just a pretty short webinar to kind of go over some best practices in terms of gathering feedback, and then also some short instruction on how to use the feedback app that we've provided to you, just to walk through a little bit. So, but if you have any sort of questions as we go through, you can type them into the chat or the Q&A. I'll probably open it up at the end to voice, so you guys can, since it is such a small group, you guys can ask questions by voice also. Okay, with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to talk really quickly about us, VeilSun, what we do, and then we'll kind of dig into why feedback matters, stages of gathering feedback, and then just some kind of tips and tricks that we found over the years for managing feedback when it comes in. We'll go through slides pretty quickly. We'll send them out after the webinar also, so don't feel like you have to take a bunch of notes. And then we will get into the suggestion box app walkthrough, and then I will end it with answering any sort of questions that come up throughout the webinar. Okay, so VeilSun, we are a QuickBase solution provider located in Denver. And what we really focus on is helping clients take advantage of the low-code revolution of you don't have to go out and buy out-of-the-box software to solve your daily needs. Things can now be implemented to fit your business exactly the way that you want them to, using low-code platforms such as QuickBase. So that's where we mainly focus around. So there's a lot of understanding people's businesses, what they need to move forward, and translating those into QuickBase. So we've been doing this for a long time now. We have about 400 successful projects under our belt. So a lot of what I share today will be coming from that experience. Last year we were Partner of the Year. We're very proud of that. Of all the 40 partners out there, and we're also a gold partner. To kind of let you know a little bit about who we serve, and then we'll jump right in. As with QuickBase, QuickBase is who we serve pretty much fits who uses QuickBase. So we work in every industry imaginable. We do have a lot of our top 5 industries are healthcare, construction, telecom, financial services, and manufacturing. So as you can see from this pie graph, these are all of our projects by industry. It's really all over the place. So what we've really focused ourselves in on is really working deeply with clients to understand the business process and of what they're trying to solve for, and then taking what experience we have in that industry to implement best practices within the app. So that's really what we focus on. And with that, we'll dive right in. So it's always the question of why feedback matters. And in our world, and user feedback is absolutely the cornerstone of having a successful QuickBase rollout. And I could tell you endless stories about people that have developed really, really cool QuickBase applications, just incredible QuickBase applications, but they fail because they never get adopted. Users get the application and they rebel, or it doesn't quite fit the need of what the users were looking for. So the first point of why feedback really matters is you learn what really matters to your users. All users kind of have different needs and think about things from different perspectives. So this allows you gathering feedback and effectively responding to it really allows you to stay close to those users so that you can delight them, because in the end, they're the ones who are going to be using the system on a daily basis. The other aspect is it increases user adoption. So when people feel like they have say over how a system works, they will tend to adopt it more. Instead of like the old IT world where IT would kind of come in and drop an application and now everybody has to use it. And if you have any sort of changes or anything you want, well, too bad, or it'll take a year to get that implemented. Well, with QuickBase, you really have the opportunity to be very close to the users, get feedback, and make changes quickly. And people start to feel like they have some ownership over the system. It's not just an app that was dropped on them. It's something that they can actually have a voice in. And then the other thing is it ensures your app never goes stale. And this is even more important. Probably the biggest power of QuickBase is that once you implement an application, it could constantly be modified as your business needs change, right? So it never gets out of date, it never gets stale. And QuickBase is a platform that you never have to leave because your business outgrows it, because you can just continue to evolve it. So capturing feedback gets you out in front of, what's going on in the business. So we call these the 4 stages of gathering feedback, because feedback really starts at the beginning of the process of when you're conceptualizing an app. So really the first stage of this is before you build. So if you have a new application in mind, it's really, really good to get feedback on that from stakeholders in your organization, thought leaders, and really get clear on what you're trying to solve for. This doesn't mean at this point necessarily going out to everybody in your organization, but a small group of people who are forward thinking. We also say potential no-nos. So there's this book out there called Our Iceberg is Melting. It's about change management. I suggest everybody reads it. But the whole onus is it's a bunch of penguins on on an iceberg, and the iceberg starts to melt. And somebody in the organization realizes it and tries to communicate it. And there is a penguin named No who absolutely no matter what, denies that this is occurring, that this is a problem that they have to solve. So it's really, really good early on to bring your potential no-nos, people that will maybe be naysayers about the app, into the process, because make them your best friend, because oftentimes these people have the best perspective, have a really important perspective. And if you can win them over early on, then it can be really powerful rather than just ignoring them. The next stage is stage 2, when you get a proof of concept. So you've kind of gathered all this stuff and you want to build, so a good best practice is you build a little bit of a proof of concept so people can get their eyes on it. Maybe it's about 80% complete, your application. Well, then you can get that same group who you met with in the beginning and ask them essentially, are we getting off track here? Does the course seem to be corrected? Does it seem like this is something that's going to work to solve this problem? And this really helps to show that you listened, and also make sure that you don't get off track. The next stage is really at beta. So, and sometimes, depending on the size of the app and how many people rolling it out, sometimes you don't have a beta release. But, let's say you're pretty much done with the application, you're going to open it up to a small group of users who can provide good feedback. Well, this is where you start to get the most valuable feedback because people are getting their hands on it. They're playing around with it, and this will really prepare you for releasing it to the rest of the organization. And you want to be really careful about who you do this beta release with, because they have to be people who are system thinkers and who will kind of understand the concept of QuickBase, and that this is really to get feedback. This isn't a finished system, but we want you to be heard and to be able to give your life into it or give your feedback into it. And then stage 4, after go live and forever, until you die. After the application has been released to general population, you should have a mechanism for gathering continual feedback from users and stakeholders of the application, because this is where you'll really increase adoption if you can respond quickly to thoughtful feedback, and it ensures that the app never goes stale. So 5 rules of effective feedback management. So once you're starting to gather feedback, feedback is a thing that if you're just gathering feedback and you don't do anything with it, it could actually reduce adoption of your application. It can make people pretty upset if they feel like you aren't listening, or if their feedback's just kind of going into a dark hole. So these are kind of our rules of best practices to make sure that you're making it a tool. One is, acknowledge the feedback. So when it comes in, let people know that you got it, that you're looking at it, that you're thinking about it. The next part is, of course, review the feedback. Understand if this is you'll find, especially if you have hundreds of users in an application, maybe thousands, that not all feedback is really actionable, or sometimes feedback from some people contradicts other pieces of feedback. You really have to have a review process to decide if this is a piece of work that you're going to do or add to the application. And if it is, then prioritize it. Is this something that needs to be implemented for this application to be successful, or is this just kind of something that's a nice to have, it's nice to have a pretty icon on this form in QuickBase, or is it something that really is stopping people from getting their daily job done? And then respond once you decide what you're going to do with the feedback ticket. If you're going to move forward with it, it's going to be prioritized. You definitely want to go back to the person who provided the feedback and let them know what the plan is. And then revisit. So even if there's feedback that you decide not to do now, you should never just delete that or forget about it. You should always revisit feedback that you're getting to look for patterns, to try to understand if there is a cold nugget in that feedback that you got, maybe even from 6 months ago or to a year ago. So you want to constantly revisit feedback that you've gotten in the past. So what I'll go into now is just a walk through the suggestion box app, because we've taken all of these things that we've learned and just gone over and implemented into an application in QuickBase, because QuickBase is a good tool for tracking anything that takes these best practices and allows you to really bring them to life. So I'll walk through this in the live application, but I just kind of want to give you guys an idea of the flow of it. So the whole idea behind it is that you invite all of your users into the application, into the feedback application, and you also put in potentially use people who never have used QuickBase into this that may have good ideas about how QuickBase can be leveraged. So you would invite them into the application. Depending on the realities of your organization, the best happy path is to kind of walk them through what they do in the application and why it's useful and why it's important. You can even steal our slides. But the idea is once they're in, while they're using one of your applications, they have an idea. Maybe this idea is is something new for the application enhancement, or maybe it's a bug, something that's broken. They can then enter it into the system. This then shows up on a queue for the administrator of all the new feedback that has been entered. And the administrative role in this app, and again, it's QuickBase, so you can change these roles around and how this works. This is just how the app works that you got. The admin can comment, you can ask clarifying questions. A lot of time you'll notice that feedback that you get is often overgeneralized, like QuickBase is broken at the extreme to, some people are very, very good at being descriptive. But you may have some of this, once it hits your queue, you may jump on a phone call with the person to get clarification or put notes into the feedback item. Then the idea is once you do that, you would classify the feedback that you got. So if you looking at the support queue decide that the user feedback it's something that you're going to work on, then you would essentially assign when you're going to work on it. If you have multiple developers in QuickBase, you may then assign a developer and a date you have planned for it to be completed. And this would show up and close the feedback loop with the person who put the feedback in, because they could see this on this dashboard. They could get an email notification that lets them know where it is in your status. If you do have multiple developers in your organization, there's actually a role in the application called developers, where if you assign it to them, it'll show up on their dashboard for something that they need to complete. Then once they start working on it, it moves into in process. User is notified if there's any sort of questions or if there's any sort of updates, they get an email. And then once development is completed, that whoever's working on the feedback item would then mark it as complete. So this is the overall flow of the application, and I'll just kind of walk through it. Okay. So when you first come into the application, you are in the admin role, as we discussed. Some of the stuff that I just walked through, there's a getting started thing. You're welcome to remove this, obviously, but it kind of walks. You can download what we just went through about the flow of the application. And it also gives some instructions, if you've never done it before, to allow large groups of people into your application. So you can either add them one by one or import them in bulk. And then, of course, you guys can always reach out if you need any help with any of this. And the first thing that you would see is the feedback queue. So this is all of the feedback that has been entered into the application, who entered it, what status it is in, when it was planned to be completed. There's a classification on if it's a bug or enhancement, and I'll show you how that works. And there's also a prioritization. And the prioritization is based on how quickly it needs to be, that feedback item needs to be done, and how critical it is for the running of the business. And I'll show you a little bit about how that logic works in a second. And then also a feedback board. So if you need to move, different feedback items into different processes, it's just QuickBase's Kanban board. And then some high-level reporting, so you can see how much feedback is being added per month, and then how much, if you have multiple developers working in your organization, how much you've completed per month. As you know, with QuickBase, you can modify all of this to fit more what you want. So if I am in the role feedback giver, so this is the role that you would invite anybody in your organization who might be providing feedback. What I see when I come in is only feedback that I've entered, so I can see the status of it. Again, there's email notifications that come out. Let's say I have a new piece of feedback that I'm going to add. So I always say add a 2 to 3 word description that makes your feedback easily identifiable, so giving it a name. So let's say in this particular case, new ops idea, app idea. And then I would categorize it as a type. So we kind of think of 3 large buckets in terms of types of feedback people may enter. Could be something is broken in an app I use. So if that is the case, then it asks for what application it is. So if you're managing multiple applications, if you want an enhancement to an app you currently use, then it would ask for an application. And then there's also, it's a great idea to, even if people aren't using, even this isn't specifically related to a QuickBase app, if they just have an idea, like you'll find that people will really embrace this if they have ideas to make things better in the organization and you've helped them identify QuickBase as a tool, then people will start to put in all these ideas and QuickBase can really grow off of that. And in that case, it's not going to put in it's not going to ask for an application. So I'm going to categorize that I have an idea for a new app. Then they can put in any sort of detailed feedback about it. I work in ops and I really need to get rid of a spreadsheet and move it into QuickBase. And they could actually put in a lot more detail and add supporting documents if they want. Add additional comments, which through the feedback process, you can go back and forth with the user using this comment field. This section is for the support team only. So I'm going to go ahead and finish adding this, and then I'm going to go in as you. So then once you get a new piece of feedback, you would then come in a blank record like this. This is what you would see. And you could then categorize it based on what the user said. So how important is it? 1 is critical to doing business. 2 is pretty important. And 3 is not critical. So if I put a critical to doing business here, and I do, then the next section is urgency. So 1, it needs to be done now. So these are your absolutely highest priority of feedback you get is something is broken that is critical to doing business and it needs to be fixed now. Or something that needs to be done soon, or 3, when you get around to it. So I'm going to say needs to be done now. Now, there's logic in here now that has prioritized that to a number 1. Basically, the formula, if you guys get into it, is importance times urgency. So if something isn't critical and it doesn't need to be done soon, then that categorizes it as a 9, right? So you could use this for your internal prioritization. You can look at it. You can move the status to planned, and you can then assign it to somebody in your organization, or it could just always be you. It just depends on how many people you have working on applications in your organization. You can assign it to you. I'm going to go ahead and assign it to myself so you can see that. You also can add subscribers to this ticket. So let's say I have a few people that I want to be watching this. Could be, you know, other stakeholders on this. I can add them here and they'll get notified of any of the feedback updates in the system. It's also going to keep an audit log. So, and this is for major changes to the feedback item. It's going to, if you change a status, it's gonna timestamp the status. When you change it to, it's going to, same with plan date, etc. So you can audit in the future, just depending on how big your organization is in terms of providing support. You could start to run metrics down here on how quickly you're able to respond and get through each of these stages of a piece of feedback that you get. So then once it gets assigned to somebody and moves to planned, of course, the person who entered the feedback gets updated. If you do have multiple developers working in your organization, if I came into my dashboard, moving to the developer role, then I would see my queue of feedback that I need to work on. So I see now that I have a bug I need to work on. It's not very high priority, but you know, we would like it done in the next 2 days. And then as a developer in the system, it won't let me save because I'm testing in a different role. I can come into here and essentially say when it's in process, and then when I'm done with it, I can mark it as complete, and then it will timestamp that. And this will, of course, keep all of the subscribers up to date, all of the people who entered in feedback, and also you as an administrator can manage the entire process on your dashboard too, where each of the tickets are, et cetera, until they're closed out. The other interesting thing that you can do, and the reason why we have an applications table here, is let's say you're managing multiple apps. So when they select a piece of when they add feedback and they assign it to an app, you can actually start to see if there's certain, let's say there's 50 apps in your organization. You can actually start to see, you know, if there's commonalities between the types of issues that are being logged, and you may find out that maybe somebody in your organization developed an app that really is getting very, very poor feedback over time. So this is just to kind of help in that process. So again, this is just a very simple starting point for capturing feedback that takes some of the best practices that we discussed earlier in the webinar and brings it to real life, and of course is open to modification from here on out. So with that, I was just going to open it up to any sort of questions that you guys might have. Ty, if you're still on, we might even just kind of open up so people can talk versus putting in questions in the question and answer. Not sure if Ty's having trouble turning on mics, but are there any questions that any of you have that you might want to ask in the chat, and I can address those? Okay. Great. Well, here at VeilSun, we hope that you guys enjoy the application. Feel free to reach out to me personally if you have any sort of questions about it. We're happy to jump on a quick call, help you get your users in, walk through the application in a little more detail with you if anything was unclear. But other than that, we hope you enjoy it. Oh, I see a question. So what Seth asked is, if I do not want users to be able to suggest a new app as a feedback option, any problem going into the field properties for type and delete that option as a choice? Nope, no problem at all. Delete away. You may have to, you may want to just for cleanliness sake, you may want to update the form rules. So you'll probably have to remove a form rule on the field or on the form. But if you don't remove that form rule, it won't cause a problem either. Just to be clean. Any other questions? Oh, I see one in Q&A. Yep. Amit, I will make sure I'll see what the issue was there with getting access to the application, the app transfer. Yep, I'll do that right when we get off and email you if I have any sort of problems. Okay. Well, with that, again, we're always here if you need any sort of help. And we will be sending out the deck from this meeting and then also a recording of the webinar if it's helpful. Thanks, everybody, and have a good holiday.